Hey, fourth grade, it's Miss Holly. We are obviously not in the library lodge this morning, but we are in Dry Valley at my house. We're going to be doing some virtual learning, as I know that you have already heard about, and I did not want a library day to get by without us reading a book together. So we're going to continue with the War Horse, our chapter book that we have been working on. And I'm going to do what I always do on Thursday. I'm going to read the last page that we finished on, just so we kind of remember where we're at before we start our next chapter. The summer passed slowly into autumn, and it became clear that our time with Friedrich was coming to an end. Such was Friedrich's attachment to Topthorn by now that he volunteered to ride him out on the gun team exercises that were to precede the autumn campaign. Of course, all the gunners laughed at the suggestion, but they were always short of good horsemen, and no one denied he was that. And so we found ourselves the leading pair once again, with crazy old Friedrich riding on Topthorn. We had found at last a true friend, and one we could trust implicitly. "If I have to die out here, away from my home," Friedrich confided to Topthorn one day, "I would rather die alongside you. But I'll do my best to see to it that we all get through and get back home. That much I promise you." Chapter 14. So Friedrich rode with us that autumn day when we went to war again. The gun troop was resting at midday under the welcome shade of a large chestnut woods that covered both banks of a silver, glinting river that was full of splashing, laughing men. As we moved in among the trees and the guns were unhitched, I saw that the entire woods were crowded with resting soldiers, their helmets, packs, and rifles lying beside them. They sat back against the trees smoking or laying out flat on their backs and slept. As we had come to expect, a crowd of them soon came over to fondle the two golden halflingers, but one young soldier approached Topthorn and stood looking up at him, his face full of open admiration. "Now there's a horse," he said, calling his friend over. "Come and look at this one, Carl. Have you ever seen a finer-looking animal? He has the head of an Arabian. You can see the speed of an English thoroughbred in his legs and the strength of a Hanoverian in his back and in his neck. He has the best of everything." He reached up and gently rubbed his fist against Topthorn's nose. "Don't you ever think about anything else except horses, Rudy?" said his companion, keeping his distance. 3 years I've known you, and not a day goes by without you going on about the wretched creatures. I know you were brought up with them on your farm, but I still can't understand what it is that you see in them. They are just 4 legs, a head, and a tail, all controlled by a very little brain that can't think beyond food and drink." "How can you say that?" said Rudy. "Just look at him, Carl. Can you not see that he's something special? This one isn't just any old horse. There's a nobility in his eye, a regal serenity about him. Does he not personify all that men try to be and never can be? I tell you, my friend, there's divinity in a horse, and especially in a horse like this. God got it right the day he created them, and to find a horse like this in the middle of this filthy abomination of a war is for me like finding a butterfly on a dung heap. We don't belong in the same universe with a creature like this." To me, the soldiers had appeared to become younger as the war went on, and certainly Rudy was no exception to this. Under his short, cropped hair that was still damp from wearing his helmet, he looked barely the same age as my Albert, as I remembered him. Guys, you remember who Albert was, right? Albert was his first owner, the one that trained him, the boy that loved him. And like so many of them now, he looked, without his helmet, like a child dressed up as a soldier. When Friedrich led us down to the river to drink, Rudy and his friend came with us. Topthorn lowered his head into the water beside me and shook it vigorously, as he usually did, showering me all over my face and neck and bringing me sweet relief from the heat. He drank long and deep, and afterward we stood together for a few moments on the riverbank, watching the soldiers playing in the water. The hill back up into the woods was steep and rutty, so it was no surprise that Topthorn stumbled once or twice. He had never been as sure-footed as I was, but he regained his balance each time and plodded on beside me up the hill. However, I did notice that he was moving rather wearily and sluggishly, that each step as we went up was becoming more and more of an effort for him. His breathing was suddenly short and rasping. Then, as we neared the shades of the trees, Topthorn stumbled to his knees and did not get up again. Guys, remember Topthorn is Joey's best friend horse. I stopped for a moment to give him time to get up, but he did not. He lay where he was, breathing heavily, and lifted his head once to look at me. It was an appeal for help. I could see it in his eyes. Then he slumped forward on his face, rolled over, and was quite still. His tongue hung from his mouth, and his eyes looked up at me without seeing me. I bent down to nuzzle him, pushing at his neck in a frantic effort to make him move, to make him wake up. But I knew instinctively that he was already dead, that I had lost my best and dearest friend. Friedrich was down on his knees beside him, his ear pressed to Topthorn's chest. He shook his head as he sat back and looked up at the group of men that had now gathered around us. "He's dead," Friedrich said quietly, and then more angrily, "He's dead." His face was heavy with sadness. "Why?" he said. "Why does this war have to destroy anything and everything that's fine and beautiful?" He covered his eyes with his hands, and Rudy lifted him gently to his feet. "Nothing you can do, old man," he said. "He's well out of it. Come on." But old Friedrich would not be led away. I turned once more to Topthorn, still licking and nuzzling him where he lay, although I knew, and indeed understood by now, the finality of death. But in my grief, I felt only that I wanted to stay with him to comfort him. The veterinary officer attached to the troop came running down the hill, followed by all the officers and men in the troop who had just heard what had happened. After a brief inspection, he too pronounced Topthorn to be dead. "I thought so. I told you so," he said almost to himself. "They can't do it. I see it all the time. Too much work on short rations and living outside all winter. I see it all the time. A horse like this can only stand so much. Heart failure, poor fella. Makes me angry every time it happens. We should not treat horses like this. We treat our machines better." "He was a friend," said Friedrich simply, kneeling down again over Topthorn and removing his head collar. The soldiers stood all around us in complete silence, looking down at the prostrate form of Topthorn in a moment of spontaneous respect and sadness. Perhaps it was because they had known him for a long time, and he had in some way become part of their lives. As we stood silent on the hillside, I heard the first whistle of a shell above us and saw the first explosion as the shell landed in the river. Suddenly the woods were alive with shouting, rushing soldiers, and the shells were falling all around us everywhere. The men in the river, screaming, ran up into the trees, and the shelling seemed to follow them. Trees crashed to the ground, and horses and men came running out of the woods in the direction of the ridge above us. My first inclination was to run with them, to run anywhere to escape the shelling, but Topthorn lay dead at my feet, and I would not abandon him. Friedrich, who was holding me now, tried all he could to drag me away, up behind the shoulder of the hill, shouting and screaming at me to come if I wanted to live, but no man can move a horse that does not wish to be moved, and I did not want to go. As the shelling intensified and he found himself more and more isolated from his friends as they swarmed away up the hill and out of sight, he threw down my reins and tried to make his escape, but he was too slow, and he had left it too late. He never reached the woods. He was struck down only a few paces from Topthorn, rolled back down the hill, and lay still beside him. The last I saw of my troop were the bobbing blonde manes of the two little halflingers as they struggled to pull the gun up through the trees, with the gunners hauling frantically on their reins and straining to push the gun from behind. Okay, guys, that was chapter 14 of War Horse. We'll pick up again real soon with chapter 15. I want you guys to know that I miss you, that I hope that we're together again real soon in the Library Lodge, but I know that we're doing what we need to do right now. We're staying safe and hopefully staying healthy during this quarantine time, and I encourage you all to read more books. I know if you're anything like us here at this house, there's a lot of television watching going on. There's some video games. There's movies. But even in the midst of all of that, we need to make time for reading, guys. So I encourage you to do that, and I look forward to meeting with you again here virtually at my house. We'll continue reading some more. Okay, hey guys, I love you. Stay safe.